In the course of our professional careers, many of us are going to be called upon to have a resume, whether it be to submit work, an artist's resume to submit work to a gallery, to a show, whether it be a resume as a creative writer to submit a resume. Suppose you want to be part of a stable of authors who are going to be doing a reading somewhere or going to be part of a public presentation, that it may be as a performing artist, that you are going to be called upon to produce your credentials, you might say. So this week we talk about writing effective resumes as well as ways to best craft a cover letter for a resume. So what is a resume? Resume is our personal and professional summary of our background and our qualifications, and usually includes information about our education, career objectives, work experience, activities, awards, or honors, or for that matter, any other special skills that we have. We might say that it's a passport to securing a good job, a good position, getting into a good show, and the like. So when we know that we are going to need to have a resume, and it's a good idea to have one anyway, even as a student, but suppose there is some position you want with a gallery, with an organization, with a performing arts center, and they've posted their job, or you're going in cold. Either way, you either want to research the job or the organization. So it's either the job information or the actual posting for a job, or put feelers out to see if an organization actually is hiring. You want to note the desired qualifications, the experience and skills that are expected within the performance of that job. Some of the ways you can find that out: you could visit the company website. You could even call or speak to someone who works for that organization to learn about their philosophy, their values, or any other pertinent information that you would need to know in order to produce or craft a resume that would best fit the position. And it's okay to have several resumes, each of them tailored with different objectives, particularly if you're a multifaceted artist. So it's a good idea to do a skills and experience inventory of yourself and check for a match with what you know and what experience you have, and does it match what the job posting or the position requires. So we might ask ourselves, what information should be in a resume? What are the characteristics of a successful resume? Are we doing a functional or chronological, the two most common types of resume styles, as well as a scannable resume? Now, scannable you can think of as putting it as a scanner, but you could also look at it as a resume that can be quickly scanned for the reader to get the maximum amount of information about you in a minimum amount of time. Because very often when a job is posted, there are many people who apply. And so the person who's reading the resumes, it wants to be able to go through a stack of things very quickly, because very often positions need to be filled very quickly. So what kind of information should be in a resume? Well, you want to be sure to identify yourself. This is not a time for nicknames, by the way, or pet names. You want to use your real name or the name that you do business as. You're also going to be noting your education. For that matter, continuing education. Continuing education means the type of learning that you're doing beyond a formal academic setting. It's not for credit, but it is educational experiences. And then what type of work or professional experience do you have? Any type of volunteer experience you might have, because volunteer experience often shows that you are willing to do things for other people, that you are not just a me, my type of person, but that you have a sense of a good heart, a socio-cultural responsibility. Computer skills are going to be really important in the 21st century. If an organization is looking at two people who are equally qualified with equal experience, one of them has computer skills, the other does not, the person with the computer skills is going to be the one who's going to be considered, because computers mediate darn near everything now, including the groceries you buy, as well as every time you turn your car on if it was made after 1990. You want to include the types of activities you enjoy doing. So what is it? Because that also in some ways shows a little bit of your character, your personality, your interests. any type of professional associations or organizations to which you belong. Sometimes there are optional sections, things that you think are important to put in there that might be of interest to the prospective employer or gallery or museum or theatrical venue and the like. You really want to make sure that you also have an objective. And we'll talk about what is a good objective in a few moments. Any types of special skills and abilities that you might have. And then also a reference statement. Who can people contact if they need to know more about you without asking you? Now, an objective statement is generally what should be the first line on your resume after your personal information. It's generally a sentence fragment with a descriptive phrase or phrases and minimal amount of punctuation, in essence, that say what you hope to accomplish with this organization. What is it you would want to do? So you would be including your skills, your qualifications, and strengths that are related to the job you're applying for, and then talking how they will suit the job you're applying for. And you want to speak in a confident tone without being pompous or presumptuous. So with objective statements, you want to make sure that you're not being too general. So you say that you want to find a position with the Museum of Modern Art that's utilizing all of my skills, experience, and knowledge. That's too darn general. No one knows what your skills, experience, and knowledge are. You want to avoid being stupid. All right, my goal is to be a meteorologist. That's someone who studies weather. But since I possess no training in meteorology, I suppose I should try stock brokerage. And if you're applying to a stock firm, I mean, they're going to think, God, I mean, this is so you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. This is your last resort. You're out of here. Now let's talk about education. For recent college graduates and students applying for internships, this is going to be an important section. You would only be including your high school if you haven't received a higher degree yet, such as an associate's or bachelor's, or if you haven't taken any college courses yet. So until your work experience is more impressive than your education, this category should be the second section in your resume. Now, it's not necessary to note your GPA, but it could be helpful if it's higher than 3.0. But GPA is kind of random and unnecessary information. You want to look more at your skills than your grade point average, because grade point average doesn't necessarily reflect someone's ability to work on the job as compared to their ability to memorize things and take tests and do well on exams. So recent graduates or students still in school should include extracurricular activities, projects, or academic achievements, because that still is something that you can show not only education, but the types of skills that you may have gained while engaged in these types of activities and what you've learned from it. With relevant coursework, that generally would follow your educational information if you use this section at all. You're going to list college courses related to the job you're applying for. And since class names differ from school to school, you're going to refer to the courses by name rather than by number. So you might say that you had a Bachelor of Arts in Film Studies, you graduated in May 2002, that you were at California State University, Sacramento, California, and then the relevant courses, suppose you're applying for work as a screenwriter, for example, in a studio. Relevant courses might be classic American films, the philosophy of literature and film, screenwriting, and the films of Alfred Hitchcock. Right, so this is when you would note coursework that may relate to a particular job, and this is one of the ways to do it. When you're talking about work experience and qualifications, that should follow either the education or should come before, depending on the section that features your strengths most prominently. But the goal is to stand out among other applicants and to persuade the employer that you are the ideal candidate for the job. So you want to include the positions that you've held that are related to the job that you're seeking first and foremost, and then they can include paid positions as well as internships, volunteer work, or appointments to certain positions. You want to be creative with this part of the resume by describing and emphasizing your experiences in the most logical way and yet the most truthful way possible. You don't want to overinflate your experiences or qualifications, because you set yourself up to be placed in a situation where you may fail big time. So with work experience, that includes the company name and location. You want to note the job title if you had one, the dates, and the duties that you fulfilled. And you want to make sure this is clear. This section's clear, concise, well-spaced, organized, and you want to bulletize things. So you also want to use action phrases to highlight the responsibilities you performed. Right? You could say, I worked at da-da-da-da, as compared to I managed a crew of individuals in the so-and-so department. Planned, oversaw, that you were responsible for, that you coordinated, you initiated, you designed, you followed through with, you programmed, you created. All right, these are all considered action phrases that in some way speak about the work that you were doing, as compared to saying, I worked at, I was employed by. All right, that's too general. You really want to, in some way, you want to be able, the reader to be able to infer the types of responsibilities that were a key part of you gaining work experience in different situations. So some examples, such as personal experience, might be you worked from 2002 to 2004 at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You were a writing center tutor. You assisted students in their writing assignments. You helped to formulate ideas through brainstorming, free writing, and outlining. That you designed and created PowerPoint presentations for students and faculty. Some of the qualifications might be, or a way to state qualifications, college internships at the Institute of American Indian Arts. You were an entertainment coordinator from 2003 to present, and this involved the need to contact and persuade local musicians to come to play free weekly concert at IAIA, help design banners and flyers for advertising upcoming events and the like. Or maybe you were in the process of coordinating a benefit concert to raise money for protests against the pipeline up north. All right, that's ways to talk about experience and qualifications using active language, bulletized for easy reading without overwhelming the readers. Specialized skills. This is going to be generally the final section of the resume, so it's really important to leave a lasting impression. Sometimes people place the skills section before the work experience section, but it's going to be similar to other sections of the resume, so you want to try and relate your skills to the desired job. So you might include skills such as computer knowledge, including specific software applications or hardware usage. For example, if you are really adept at repairing Mac computers or building PC computers, this is a good thing to highlight. Or if you're good at helping troubleshoot network problems, this is a good thing to highlight. So computer knowledge, foreign language expertise, military service, musical abilities, believe it or not, anything else that is going to separate you from the crowd. And then additional information. This is something that you could include things beyond your special skills, but they could also infer specific skills. So if you've gotten any types of awards, any types of testimonials or endorsements, any types of publishing credits, patents you may hold, your ability and the types of public speaking you have done, places you have spoken even, your willingness to travel, or even having a portfolio of art or writing samples to illustrate your work. You could mention, without including these, that these are available upon request. You could include it, but there is a good chance if someone is having to do a real quick scan of a lot of resumes, they may not look at this section. So you just mention that it's available, and then you can send it to them via email. This is why computer skills are really important also, because you want to be able to get a resume to an organization literally in microseconds by emailing them, and then letting them know that they've got an attachment, and then hard copy, if they want it, will follow. And then with references, they may or may not be included in your resume. You want to keep in mind that some companies won't read more than one page, so it's acceptable to just write references are available on request. If you're asked to provide references by an employer, it's a good idea to include professional references like a professor or a previous employer. You want to include the name, address, email address, phone number of each reference, and you want to ask permission from your references before including their personal information on a reference sheet. So it's inferred that someone who is going to be a reference is going to speak highly of you. So you want to make sure your references are going to speak highly of you for that matter. Now, when we think about organization, that we want to organize our resumes to highlight our most unique skills and strengths. So we're going to use whatever combination of organization skills that we think best showcases our individual qualifications. The most common styles are reverse chronological and functional styles of organization. Reverse chronological means that you present your educational as well as work experience in chronological order, beginning with your most recent. So employers would be reading what you've done lately to what you have done more so in the past, but they would be reading the most recent stuff first, and then the things you've done in the past would be further back in the resume or lower on the page. This style is best for people whose job experiences really closely parallel the positions for which you're applying, or for those who have not had periods of employment between jobs. All right, so you really want to be thinking about how closely what you're doing matches the job that you're applying for, as well as how much you may have been unemployed between jobs. Because invariably, when employers see large gaps of time in between jobs, they're going to know what was going on between it. Or if you've been in many different jobs, they're going to want to know why. Which brings us to the functional style of organization for resumes. So you're organizing your experience by the type of function that you performed. So under each function, you give specific examples. So if you were a grant writer, right, then you note the different organizations who you worked for and the types of grants upon which you worked, as well as possibly the amount of money for each successful grant that you wrote. So you're placing things in order of importance rather than chronological order. So suppose in one organization you were a grant writer, in another organization you were doing a lot of design and layout, and then you'd list the different publications that you worked upon. All right, so it's not necessarily chronologically, but it's almost by topic or function or job performed. So this is really important to consider in a functional, is that you're ignoring any experiences that don't relate to the job that you're applying for. So you want to be really careful that you only include the experience that relate to functions that you may be fulfilling in the organization that you wish to work with. And this type of resume is really appropriate for people with periods of unemployment between jobs, because you're doing it by function. You're not noting time, so people aren't going to wondering, oh, what were you doing between 2007 and 2010? There's a big gap here. Or you haven't included dates, you've included functions and organizations, and if they want to follow up, they can find out how long you were there. But it's still, if it's a scannable resume, which means it can be read very quickly because it's on one page, those types of details most people may not actually want to follow up on. They just want to know, can you do the job or not? Do you have the skills and the experience or not? So what we might look at as being some successful resume characteristics, you want to make sure that you're objectively and truthfully relating what you know to the job posted or the one that you're seeking. You want to focus on your skills. You want to use action words to define the responsibilities of your job-related experiences. You want them to be easy to read and to understand. You want them to be visually powerful and free of gimmicks, and usually one page, at most 2 pages long. You also want to make sure that your language is grammatically correct. People do look at that. That your spelling has been checked. It's really important with spelling as well as grammar and punctuation. Do not just use your spell checker, because you could have a word spelled correctly, but it's the wrong word. For example, A-N or A-N-D. They're spelled correctly, but if you leave off that D when it's supposed to join two things together, like peanut butter and jelly, and you've got peanut butter and jelly instead, that's a typo. So you want to be sure to go beyond the spell checker and actually do a visual check of your resume and have someone else read it too, because you can look at something so long that you know what it's supposed to say, so you miss things because you'll automatically fill in the missing letters, the missing words even. And your mind will automatically correct the spelling on things that are misspelled. You want to use a formal style. Always be 100% truthful. You want to contain no inappropriate personal information. In other words, you don't want to tell people necessarily your age if it doesn't relate to the job. If it doesn't relate to the job, if it doesn't relate to a qualification, experience, or skill, don't include that information. You want to make sure it is produced on a computer. One, so that you can email it in a digital format, also that you can save it as a document as well as a portable document format, a PDF that's read only by Adobe Acrobat or PDF readers. That's a computer skill. And you want to make sure that if you're doing a chronological resume, that you're presenting the data in a chronological order, unless you're doing it functional. In that case, you're doing it by a skills or topical order. Some slip-ups that can occur. You want to be really aware of grammar and typos and the like, or incomplete information. For example, you have a proven ability to track down and correct errors. And then you see here, errors is spelled wrong. I'm a perfectionist and rarely, if ever, forget details, when it should say details. Or under accomplishments, you might say, completed 11 years of high school. Someone who reads that's going to think, must be a high school dropout. They didn't get past the 11th grade. You also want to be aware that you're not using the words I or me. You really want to keep your resume as objective as possible. With a functional resume, you want to make sure that you're not going in chronological order, that you're basing this resume on skills and competencies, that you're going to be using it for career changers, or you may have unconventional work histories such as executives or run and gun for hire curators, that you're in a number of different shows if you're an artist, right? So you want to make sure then that with a functional resume that you want to highlight your skills and you want to cluster those skills and really de-emphasize the importance of specific jobs and highlight your skills more. Now, a scannable resume, you want to be careful with bullet points that you don't have too many of them, because people don't always scan through them very easily. Sometimes they're almost like visual roadblocks or speed bumps. So you also want to be aware of dashes and the like. What a bullet does is it can often stop you as you're reading, as compared to a dash. Believe it or not, sometimes can show something more as being list-oriented, but you still want to be aware. You also want to be sure to have labels or keywords as headings or subheadings. Think less is more, too, that you want to have as much as you can in abbreviated sentences, not necessarily sentence fragments, because sentence fragments can be sometimes difficult to discern the meaning from, and too little of a fragment can also be a visual speed bump for the reader when they have a lot of reading to do. You want to make sure the design is simple, and you want to use abbreviation, or you want to minimize the use of abbreviations, because abbreviations are, in essence, visual speed bumps. And when we're looking at design being simple, really avoid making your resume look too fancy. One of the worst things as a painter that someone could do is that you've had a really nice matting job done in a really nice frame, and they walk by the painting and say, wow, what a great frame, what a great matte job, and they don't talk about the painting. Or you've got a sculpture on a pedestal and they say, wow, that's a great pedestal, and they don't talk about the sculpture. You want people to focus on the content, not the container. Right? So the resume is the container, the design is the container, the content are your skills, your aptitudes, your objectives, your experience. So a basic checklist. You want to make sure that you've eliminated spelling, grammatical, or punctuation errors, that it's neat, clean, professional looking, that it's no more than 1 or 2 pages long. You've got margins at the sides and then at the bottom, that the layout makes the reading of that resume easy to scan, easy to follow, and that actually using white space is very effective. That's nothing worse as someone who's reading 50 resumes to be looking at 50 resumes that look as if someone just painted black over every page, that there's so much text. They actually get burned out and actually become quite irritated, and may even have a tendency to disregard something that has too much information overload. You want to be considering that important titles should be emphasized. Also experiment with different fonts and styles, such as bold, italic, and underlines, and see how they augment and enhance the content that you're delivering. You don't want to use any more than 2 or 3 different sizes of type, and for that matter, no more generally than 2 different fonts. So for example, you may have heading fonts and then body fonts, and that's it. You really want to minimize the too much visual distraction. You want to make sure that your information is logically recorded, that you're using action verbs for accomplishments and results. And something that I pointed out in lecture in a classroom is that if your resume is going to be sent over the web and someone's going to be reading it on a computer screen, you want to make sure that you use a font that is sans serif. A serif is an adornment on a letter that gives it a distinct look. So a serif type of font would be something like Times New Roman. Times New Roman has, the letters look like they're wearing a hat, that the letters of a T at the end of the arms on the T, it looks like it might be wearing gloves, and then there are feet on the bottom, whereas something that is sans serif, for example, if you look at the I in information here, it looks like just a line that's running perpendicular to the page. If this was Times New Roman, there would be a little hat and little feet at the bottom of that I, capital I, that would show you that that's a different font. So if it's going to be to the web, you don't want to use serif fonts. You want them to be sans serif, without serifs, without adornments, because on a computer screen, the serif fonts tend to blur together. Now, if it's a printed resume, then those types of fonts would work, like Times New Roman. And Times New Roman also looks very professional. When possible, you want to bullet points. You want to bulletize the accomplishments. And that's, as you can see here, these are bullets. All right, it allows a person to discern different chunks of information. Whenever you can quantify the results. In other words, quantify means can you assign a number to it? And that might be as something that you've done. Successfully wrote 4 grants for the Institute of American Indian Arts to help with improving the sound system in the digital dome. All right, so quantification, can you put numbers on it? And then you want to be aware of the format. Is it chronological or functional? These are the 2 most common, and each one is targeted towards specific purposes. Now, every resume is going to need a cover letter attached. So an effective cover letter would accompany a resume, whether it's by email or snail mail. If it's going by email, your cover letter might be the email itself, and then you would say, attached, please find my resume. And then you give you actually note the resume title, DOC, like it could be faddenresume.docx. If you are sending it by snail mail, you would say, enclosed, please find my resume. That's the professional language to use. But a cover letter also introduces you to a prospective employer, a collaborative partner, and etc. And it really sets the tone for the resume that's about to be read. So it allows you in some way to introduce yourself to the person in a personal manner, conversational, rather than just reading a resume. It allows you to greet the person, in some way possibly massage them a little bit, and then prepare them to read the resume. Some of the rules of a cover letter: you want to give enough information to interest the reader, but not overwhelm them. You want to make sure that you address or you research the company and that you can address the letter to a specific person. Last resort, you would be writing to whom it concerned. Dear sirs, there is so much information out there on the internet about different departments and who works for companies now that you want to look at who is going to be reading that resume or who is going to be considering hiring you, and you want to address the letter to them. You make it as personal as you can. To whom it may concern is very impersonal. So you really want to research your company before you compose the letter, and then as you tool or retool your resume. And answer an ad. If you see an ad for a position, if you have at least half of the skills or the background that ad requires, answer that ad and note some of those skills in that letter. And I always lived by that credo, you know, you're not going to catch anything if you don't fish. So if you've got a fish hook with half a worm on it, throw it out there. You never know what's going to bite. And then if you were referred to by someone to that job, mention that person who referred you if appropriate, because they are a way of including a reference that the person who's reading the resume could check. It also could give you a little bit of credibility by association if that person who referred you to the job or the organization carries some weight with the organization or is a personality that many people know in a favorable light. You want to include your name, your address, city, state, zip, telephone number. You want to make sure that you have the date. Other information to include now might be your email, particularly in an electronic format, as well as if you have a Facebook page that is dedicated solely to your business, not a friendly Facebook page where you're showing yourself at some restaurant, you know, eating a burrito. All right, that's personal stuff. It's random. You don't want that. Besides, other people may post stuff on your timeline you would not want a prospective employer to read. So make sure it's strictly your professional Facebook page if you're going to list that. But then you also want to make sure you have the name, title, company, address, city, state, and zip of the person you're writing to. And then a greeting, you know, that is followed by a colon. And when you're looking at the contents then, paragraph 1, what is it that you wish to achieve? I wish to work with the Museum of Contemporary Native American Art with the registrar and assisting the registrar with incoming works of art. How do you know about the organization? You note how you found out about the position being open. Did you read about it? Did you see it online? Was it a posting in the newspaper? Did someone tell you about it? And then you mention that you've enclosed your resume. Paragraph 2 is going to be a concise overview of your work history, the skills that have helped you perform a job. So this is kind of pre-organizing the person who's reading your resume. They know what kind of things to look for because you've mentioned them very briefly in the cover letter, and then you highlight them even more in the resume itself. Amplify even more in the resume itself. In the third paragraph, you want to state your confidence in your ability to perform, your enthusiasm to work with this organization, and your enthusiasm to contribute to this organization's overall goals and how it may be in line with your own personal philosophy. You want to be sure you give information on how you can be contacted. And then in the last paragraph, that you express your appreciation to the person for having taken the time to read your letter, and that you look forward to speaking with them or hearing from them. And then you have your closing, your signature, as well as a typed name. And now you can even have digital signatures. We're using a digital pen. You can actually create your signature on a digital pad. It scans into the computer, and then you can attach that to letters. But you also want to have your name typed too, especially if you have writing that's as bad as mine.